PT Poppy are all four lobes of my brain securely bound behind my back. And tonight I'm going to talk about my worst supervisor ever. Stay tuned. Hey, before I get to my worst supervisor ever, I want to have Oingo Boingo say hi. Hey there, everybody. Little Big Chuck and Houlihan laugh. That's from a show here in Cleveland called Big Chuck and Houlihan. Also want to plug my book, my call center book. This is not a biography. This is a book of fiction called Press 1 for Murder. This is about a young man who works in a call center, and he starts to lose his marbles, and some of his customers turn up dead, and the police think he is the murderer. Buy that on Amazon. I've also got shirts, Call Center Survivor. You can buy these at teespring.com. Press 1 for Murder t-shirts, both on teespring.com. You can get those in hoodies and in t-shirts. So what I want to talk about tonight was my worst supervisor ever, and that was a supervisor I had at Verizon Wireless. Now, I literally dreamed of working at Verizon, because one time I used to work in telecommunications. Up until 2001, I'd had a career in telecom, and I got laid off, and I decided to move to Phoenix, Arizona, where there were no telecom jobs, unfortunately. After living there for about 5 years, I got hired at Verizon Wireless in the call center, and I was thrilled. I couldn't wait to work at Verizon. It was a great cell phone company. That was the only cell phone company I had ever had. I had great service, great coverage. It was phenomenal service. So when I got hired there by the leading cell phone provider in the country, I was so excited to be with this company. I was excited to be back in telecommunications, and I was really excited to be working for one of the premier cell phone companies in the world. My last supervisor there was a gentleman. Let's say his name was Gary Flint. That wasn't his name, but let's just say his name was Gary Flint. And Gary, gentleman who made it more than clear that he was a United States Marine, a former Marine for the United States Marine Corps. He did, several years of the Marines, and he came to work at Verizon, and he had worked at Verizon for like 15 years. So he had all kinds of service with Verizon. And this gentleman, and I use the word gentleman very loosely, this African-American gentleman made it very clear he was a huge Tiger Woods fan. And this is before all the Tiger Woods scandal with him sleeping around and losing his golf swing after that. So Tiger was in the prime of his career. And this guy was a big Tiger Woods fan, and he was a big golf fan. He loved to golf. So before I went to his team, my previous supervisor said, "You're going to love being on Gary's team. He's great. He's one of the best supervisors on the floor. You're going to love him." Actually, she said it like this: "Oh, you're going to love Gary. He's such a mosa. He's such a mosa." She talked like this. She really had nothing to say. She was the woman I refer to in some of my other videos about Verizon, who was kind of a ding-dong. So I had all these high expectations to be on Gary's team, and when I met him, he was a little bit older than me, really good shape, gentleman, good build. He was a sharp dresser. He always came in wearing golf shirts. He was always wearing golf shirts, those tapered knit shirts that all the golfers wear with the pastel, the bright oranges, the pinks, the shocking pinks, and the blues. And he had nice khaki pants on, and his hair was always cut like a Marine, with a flat top and the whole thing. He was kind of living in two worlds. He was kind of still in the Marine Corps in his mind, but he kind of imagined himself as a golfer working in the business world. So he was fairly friendly to me when we first met, but I noticed when I got on the team that he had 30 people on his team, and the team all sat together in the corner of this big call center, and the white people were on the left, and the Hispanic and black people were on the right. And I went, that's kind of weird. That's really weird. Why would you have it kind of segregated like that? But I just ignored it. So I started to take calls, and over time, the first month or so, I didn't hear from him. I never saw him. We never spoke. And then one day he came up to me and said, "Hey, it's time to review your calls." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And I'd already been with the company. I had been with the company for about a year up to this point. So my first call review, he picked out 3 calls that I completely failed, or at least he said I failed. I'm like, that's kind of weird. And he said, why? And I said, well, I've been here a year, and how did you happen to find just 3 calls that I flunked out of the thousands of calls I take a week? I mean, I take like 80 calls a day. And when I said to him, I said, well, okay, I do 80 calls a day, 5 days a week. That's 400 calls a week. That's 1,600 calls a month. How did you just happen to find 3 calls that I failed out of 1,600 in that 1 month? He's like, and he was the zipping and the bipping guy. He was kind of like Bill Cosby, because he zipping and the bipping and the hipping and the hopping. He was that guy. He kind of talked like, Bill Cosby, because he was kind of like, well, we pulled these calls from the database, and there's nothing we can do. It's just who hears them, and when they pull them, the zipping and the bipping, the people in the Q&A, they're zipping and they're, whoa. Hey, is Fat Albert around here to answer this call for this young man? So he basically, like an African-American Bill Clinton combined with Bill Cosby, he kind of talked his way around, and he didn't really have an answer for it. So next month goes by, and he's gone. Sometimes I wouldn't see this guy for 6 weeks at a time. He'd just be gone. He'd be out golfing. So what had happened is he had been with the company so long, 15 years, he had accumulated all this vacation time. So he was always out in the links in Arizona. The call center was in Arizona. And so he was always out golfing, and he'd be gone all the time. So he kept writing me up. Not writing me up, but he kept, pulling calls. He'd critique me. He said, here's how to fix them. And I kept saying, well, how are you finding these bad calls? I have to have done, out of 1,600 calls a month, I had to have done 1 or 2 correct, right? He's like, well, we just didn't happen to zipping and the bipping and the hipping. We were, Q&A. They were, He was a combination of Bill Cosby and the Three Stooges, a black Three Stooge. So I was talking to one of my coworkers. Let's say her name was Mary. And I asked Mary about it, and she said, well, he always writes up the white people on the team. And I said, you're kidding me, right? He said, is that why the room is segregated? She's like, I don't know about that, but he's always writing us up, like all of us on this side of the room. And I noticed that the guys on the other side of the room that were Hispanic and black were never at their desks. They'd take a couple of calls, then they'd get up and wander around. And some of them had been there a couple of years. And I'm like, well, how come these guys get to wander around and get to do what they want? She's like, well, just figure it out for yourself, she basically said to me. So I put 1 to 1 together and realized the zipping and bipping, let's say Gary was a little bit racist. So he was gone. He'd be gone. He'd come in and give me reviews, give me a bad review. I'd get maybe 2 calls failed out of the 3 that they would do, because they always do 3 call reviews. So after like 6 months, I said, hey, what's going on here? This doesn't make any sense. He's like, what? And I said, well, you're always failing in my calls. He goes, well, you've got to improve on your calls. I said, hold on a second. Again, I do 1,600 calls a month. How are you finding the 3 calls that I just happen to fail? He goes, well, and I said, this doesn't make any sense. Number 1, you're never here to coach me. So you're leaving me out there by myself on my own. You never sit down with me and help me with anything. You're always out golfing. So you cannot fail me on these calls this month. After 6 months, I said this to him. I've never been disobedient or insubordinate to a supervisor in my life before this moment or after. And he's like, I said, you're not here. You're not doing your job. You're not here to coach me on these calls. So you cannot let these go through this time, because you have to help your people out there. I can't just go out there and figure it out for myself. He was like, he's zipping in. He's got me on the ropes. I better get my 9-iron. So he's like, okay, I won't let these go. I'll let these go this time, but next time we'll have a serious talk. This guy, the bottom line was, from what I had seen of him, what my impression was of him, he not only didn't do his job, he only critiqued the white people on the team. And he let the black and the Hispanic people their performance slide. He let them do what they want. They walked around. They had breaks all the time. And it really was awful. This guy was awful. He had it out for me. He had it out for every white person on the team. And I went to HR about it, and they're like, well, we don't know what you're talking about because we don't have anything in your file. There's nothing in your file showing you've been disciplined. None of these call reviews are sent down to us, so we have no idea what you're talking about. So they basically stuck their head in the sand and went, oh, well, I don't, we'd have to do an investigation. They said, do you have any of this documented? And I said, well, I sign off on these reviews. You just got to do an audit of his team. And I tell you this is what I think of this man. This is the only person I think this of. If I found out tomorrow he had stage 4 cancer, I'd be dancing the jig. If I found out he got hit by a bus and it took him like several days to die after that, I would be dancing the jig. I'd be so happy. And when he dies, if I find out where he is buried, I will dance on his grave. This is a disgusting, deplorable, crappy individual. Just horrible man. Horrible man. He was polite, and he was well-spoken, and he was well-dressed, but he was an asshole. He was a downright, living, breathing, drooling, disgusting a-hole. And he is the worst supervisor I'd ever had. If you've had a bad supervisor out there, let me know about him. And again, the book is Press 1 for Murder. And I got t-shirts, Call Center Survivor.
And hoodie and t-shirt form, Press 1 for Murder. Oh, I got a sad wife. Nothing else upside down now. I'm all twisted which way up,
On teespring.com, I got a new song coming out called Call Center Blues. I'll be working on that. And then my next video about call centers will be about, based off a suggestion of one of my viewers, asked me to do a video about intranets, how the company's intranet is terrible. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching. PT Pop signing off. You have a great day. Bye.